From Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, this is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at Case. Thanks for joining me, and it's great to be back with you again. I chose this opening music that has a little bit of guitar in it because my guest today is a guitarist, and I too have started to play a little bit of guitar, but I'm a total hack. However, my guest is not. Before we get into my conversation today with Dr. Yee, I want to give a few shout outs to some avid listeners that I've gotten to know a little bit over the last couple of months. I want to say hello to Danny at UVA, Sean at Arizona State, Kylan, who's probably near Kyle Field at Texas A&M, and Mike, who is also from Texas at the University of North Texas. I really appreciate everyone that takes the time to listen to this show. If you're new to the show, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you get these episodes as soon as they drop. I also get questions to the podcast inbox, which is allaccess@case.edu. And I received this one from Kylie at Grand Valley State University in Michigan, which I thought was a good one and one that probably other students also have. She asks, I've heard that letters of recommendation from upper level classes are better, and I'm finally getting into those classes. Last semester, though, it was a little tricky trying to get to know the professors and for them to get to know me since most of my semester was online. How do I develop solid relationships with my professors this school year? Considering all the online learning going on this semester, this is a tough one. I talked about it with Dr. Mehta, my Dean of Admissions, and while I don't think we came up with anything magical, we feel that this year it's all about the office hours. So become a familiar face at those virtual office hours. Then maybe later in the semester, talk with your instructor and let them know that you may be asking them in the future if they would be willing to write a letter of recommendation for you. So also keep some kind of resume updated so that you can share it with your future recommenders because they might want to know other things that you're involved in too. So office hours this year. Again, a tough question, but something I thought that other listeners are also concerned about too. I know that many of you are starting your fall semester, and I'm asking each of you to do your part so that together your school can weather the storm. Wear your face covering, practice physical distancing, avoid large gatherings, show up as the leaders and do all that you can to keep your community safe. So I pledge to you that I'm going to do the same too. Okay, let's talk about Duke Med. Here's some background information about this medical school we're going to talk about today. The Duke University School of Medicine is located in Durham, North Carolina, and is a part of the Research Triangle of the Piedmont region of that state. The medical school has been in Durham since 1930 and is considered one of the top medical schools in the United States. Medical students at Duke Med train within the Duke University Health System, which is a world-class healthcare network providing outstanding patient care and cutting-edge research, as well as creating and educating tomorrow's visionary healthcare leaders. Duke Med is a diverse and inclusive community of trainees devoted to understanding the causes, prevention, and treatment of human disease. These endeavors are embraced by all students committed to the highest academic goals, utilizing unparalleled resources in education, clinical care, and research. The objective is to educate physicians with an innovative curricula and broad-based clinical and research training. They are a private institution and accept applications from all U.S. citizens, international applicants, including Canadians, and those with the DACA status. For the entering class of 2020, the medical school received 7,622 applications and interviewed 674 applicants for a class size of 120, which included 106 regular MDs, 7 in their primary care leadership track, and 8 MD PhD students. 64% of their entering class were comprised of women, and 28% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. Now let me tell you a little bit about my guest, Dr. Linton Yee. Dr. Yee is the Associate Dean for Admissions for Duke's Medical School and is an Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics, Division of Emergency Medicine. He was the interim co-associate dean of admissions in 2017 and has been the vice chair and chair of the School of Medicine's admissions committee prior to that. In addition, he was the clinical course director for the Body and Disease class in the School of Medicine from 2009 to 2019. He is also the Asian Pacific American Student Association faculty advisor and leader of the Student Faculty Show Band. Dr. Yee graduated from the University of Hawaii John A. Burns School of Medicine and did his residency in pediatrics at Harbor UCLA Medical Center, followed by a fellowship in pediatric emergency medicine at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. Before joining Duke in 2007, he worked at Kapolani Medical Center for Women and Children in Honolulu, Hawaii, at Harbor UCLA Medical Center in Torrance, California, and Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego, California. I've gotten to know Dr. Yee a little bit over the last few years, and he is a really down-to-earth guy and a very interesting person. So let's jump right into it with Dr. Yee. Enjoy. Hey, Dr. Yee, it's great to have you here this afternoon. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to come and talk to us about everything Duke Med.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the invite. Be glad to, meet up with you again and go over things.
Yeah. So, before we get into everything, I want to talk a lot about your curriculum because it's kind of a unique structure, and then we'll talk about your admissions process. But I always like to start with guests and talking about you and kind of filling in some of the gaps. We just heard your bio sketch. And so how did you decide to go in? Let's start with like medicine. How did you choose medicine as a career pathway?
Well, it ended up being a roundabout way because I actually wanted to go into music, but I found that with music there are certain limitations, in terms of being able to, I guess, eat, pay the rent. So I kind of had always been interested in the sciences, so yeah. I drifted back over towards the medicine part. And
well, you were serious into music.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Really close to, like you told me, going to music school.
Yeah. Yes.
To play guitar.
Yep. Jazz guitar performance would have been my goal. I guess we would have, I never wouldn't have known how far I would have gotten, but
yeah. That's cool. So you still play?
Yes. Still have the same Gibson ES355 that I had since high school, and I've acquired a few other things along the way as well. But
do you still play only jazz, or do you play all kinds of stuff?
Oh no, actually, even before I used to play a lot of rhythm and blues, funk, that sort of thing. So they're all kind of like the jazz stuff was kind of similar. Like you'd have the major ninth, the minor ninth, the suspended fourths, and all those sort of things. Along with using triads and. The lead lines, whether you were a modal kind of guy or just, that sort of, approach.
So you still play?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Do you play with students at Duke, or do you play, like, how does that, when do you get to play?
Right. Yeah. So
you're a busy guy.
Yeah. So we actually, the students kind of like, found out that I used to play before. And then one of the students, Taylor Broom, who I think is probably a fourth year med peds at Michigan now, she kept asking me every year. So finally I told her, all right, before you graduate, I'll play.
Yeah. And
so I was actually able to get the 355 refurbished. And then, so the first edition of the Student Faculty Show Band was, I think 4 years ago. And so we got, because there were a lot of other musicians within the school, whether they be faculty or students. And so I got everybody together. And so we did, pick up the pieces, and then with the cast you can't always get what you want. Uh-huh. And then since that time, it's kind of grown to, we actually have a full, we have probably 10 songs sometimes that we play cool. in each year. And we've got, solidified, band members that, are, they're counting on this happening every year. So
that's cool.
It's actually turned out pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Oh, that's really fun. How about, how'd you get into, so what you're from Hawaii?
Yes, but I grew up in Sacramento and Los Angeles as well.
Yeah. Okay. So then how did you wind up in Durham?
Oh, yeah, we kind of took a little bit of a risk, much to my wife's chagrin. Yeah, so what happened is, I was in San Diego prior to coming to Durham, and then we were going to eventually move from San Diego, and there were a number of other places that were looking for people who, the primary goal was to, go into helping with the pediatric emergency medicine education curriculum.
Okay.
But the secondary goal also, because I had been involved with admissions at UC San Diego, was to also have the admissions component as part of that as well.
Oh, wow.
And so part of the draw to being here in Durham was, because I was able to do both things. And because it was pretty much a clear slate in terms of establishing a pediatric emergency medicine, education curriculum here, because there was nothing in place, really when I first got here.
Oh, wow.
And so, I was able to help stabilize that for both the emergency medicine and the pediatric departments. And then plus the department chair at the time was the son of actually the department chair of Harbor UCLA back in the day, who had been hiring all the people who had mentored me as resident, and when I was doing
small world
fellowship thing. So that was kind of like a draw. Because I remember going up to Dr. Emanuelides, who's one of the the grandfathers of pediatric cardiology, and I asked him, well, what do you think about moving to Durham? And he goes, if the son is anything like the dad, you probably need to go.
Yeah.
And so I having known Dr. Emanuelides for decades, I trusted his judgment. So we kind of made the move over here because we had never been on the East Coast. We had never been in the South. And then, so it was kind of like a bit of a change for us, especially, for the kids, because they had always lived within sight of the Pacific Ocean.
Oh my gosh.
And now, we're moving inland. So my son says, Dad, I can't become a really good surfer if we move to North Carolina. And I told him, well, at the time, which I think was true, the editor for Surfer Magazine actually was a Duke graduate. So I told him that, and so that was enough to sell him on it.
It'll work out.
Yeah. And so, but I guess, so my son's really never gone surfing anymore. And my daughter, I guess, who was on a board, when she could, barely walk, she doesn't really go out there anymore either. So,
oh my gosh.
So they kind of lost those skills, but it worked out okay.
What's interesting is that admissions was a part of the deal, though, too.
Right. Correct.
Why the attraction to admissions? Like, when did that start? How did that become a part of your career pathway?
Yeah, well, actually all started in med school, because I remember at the time they were looking for help with the admissions process in terms of anything. And so, of course, I don't know why, but I kind of said, well, I can give tours or create tours, because there was nothing in place prior. Mm-hmm. So, I think that was probably a first year or second year med student. But, by the time I was, a fourth year, we had tours of all the teaching hospitals and the campus. And so we actually established something pretty good there. And then, in residency, I'd always worked a lot, with the students, and then even in fellowship, I'd worked a lot with the students. So that kind of followed me throughout there. And then, when I moved back to Hawaii, I had done some admission stuff with them. And then when I moved to San Diego, then I became, even more involved there. And then, here with, Durham, there's, Brenda Armstrong was here. So, that was that was a game changer right there. It's like, hey, you get to work with Brenda Armstrong.
Yeah, Dr. Armstrong was a force and a legend in admissions, and she was what a great role model, a mentor to have.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what do you like most about the admissions work? What do you?
I like meeting the people. I think it's the students that really. Because the students are the lifeblood of the school. They're the heart and soul of what happens here, and just getting a chance to meet all of them and see all the fantastic things they've done, and I think that's that's probably the most rewarding thing of all. It's just it's the people aspect of it that really kind of makes things happen in a good way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because when applicants ask me, what do you like most about CASE? And it's the students. You can have hospitals and Nobel laureates and, research opportunities, but it's at the end of the day, for me, it's still the students and the people.
Yeah. Cause the school itself, it really is just, 4 walls and a roof, but what emanates from that is what the students generate. They become the drivers, the movers of what happens within the school. And, and we kind of look at them as a renewable resource too, because every year they challenge us and they make us, and they remind us this is how it should be, because a lot of times you can become, somewhat disenchanted with things just because of all this, the red tape you got to deal with it. Yeah. But they always remind you that, this is the way it could be. This is the way it should be. So it helps to, I think, rejuvenate us, in terms of, what we do and remind us that, hey, there's, it can be better than it is right now.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Dr. Yee, what's something that you find is people are surprised to learn about you?
Oh, well, I guess part of it's the music thing. The other thing is like I used to write for on fantasy hockey.
Really?
Yeah. So I used to write for ESPN for I think a couple of years, if I remember correctly, I was one of the correspondents, and then I wrote for fantasyhockey.com for a number of years, covering like the Western teams, and plus, I think they had me focusing on the defensemen. So,
oh my gosh. That's crazy.
Yeah, but I don't really play hockey. I don't really.
But how did you get into being a big hockey? Were you like a LA Kings fan? Or
yeah. So that was it. It was all the Gretzky, Robitaille sort of thing. And then plus, when we were little kids, we would always collect hockey cards.
Really?
Because they were in two different languages, and we thought it was kind of cool that it wasn't French and English. We thought that was kind of cool that it wasn't two different languages, even though we didn't know how to speak any French. But yeah, so that was a draw to hockey, and then I would watch it, and then you start kind of like analyzing things, and so that's kind of helped with the with going over the application process, because you have to make like an assessment of what the applicant's like and projections.
Oh my God, you're right. Oh, that's crazy. Yeah. So did you or do you still play fantasy hockey?
No,
you just analyze stuff.
Yeah, I used to play fantasy hockey too, but but after a while it became way too time consuming, because you would have to like generate something like every week or every 2 weeks, because people are they want to know what who should I pick up now, or who should I cut, or who's like a sleeper that I should look forward to. But it got way too involved, and I think plus the guy who was in charge of the website, I think they eventually stopped that, and he went to a different website. So,
oh my gosh, that's so cool. Yeah. That is so cool. I love asking that question, because you never know what people are going to say, and I guess I would have never thought about writing for fantasy hockey.
And so one time, I was interviewing it in Pittsburgh, right? And the guys wanted to talk about fantasy hockey because they had seen what I had written, and they wanted because they're big Penguins fans and stuff. They wanted to know other things about. Well, what about this guy?
That's a cool thing for listeners to hear, because that's we'll talk about application stuff, but that's one thing like you should put in your application of those hobbies and interests. Right. It can generate other parts of conversations, and you're connecting with people in a different way. They want to know more about your writing in fantasy hockey. Then they know you're competent, and a good physician, but let's talk about the hockey stuff.
The same. Like when I interviewed here, Del Wigfall, who's one of our advisory deans, I mean, he had jazz music in the background. We talked about the music instead of more about anything else. And I still remember being in his office doing that interview, because that was totally cool that we just talk about music.
And that can happen in some medical school interviews. Then we'll talk about MMI and stuff, but that's sometimes how you connect with some of the people that you're meeting and form, you guys have something in common together, which can help maybe you settle down a little bit, because we're talking about things that are not related to medicine and things. So we're talking about similar interests.
Then, even when the students are seeing patients, I mean, this is what we tell them. It's like when you're seeing a patient, it's about developing some sort of connection, some sort of relationship with them. And then, it's a random assignment. I say, go into recess 3 or whatever and figure out what's going on. And then all they know is like, they know the chief complaint, the age, and the name. And in a short span of time, you've got to figure out what's going on and why, and develop some sort of plan. So you have to have some point of connection and to develop some sort of relationship with that person. And so that's why we look for people who have, a diverse set of experiences and stuff, because eventually you'll find something that you have in common, and that immediately changes the whole demeanor of what's going on, because now, you can work from that to build on, okay, this is what we have to do next. I mean, it could be something, like just like cooking. that you like. Maybe you say, oh, I'm from, this part of the country and we like this sort of barbecue. And then your patient says, well, hey, I'm actually from this area. We like this sort of barbecue. But then, it's a connection. And that just, changes, the way things are perceived. Because a lot of times, the patients are, they're not feeling well. Someone's told them something they don't understand, or all of the above. And then your role when you walk into that room is to make all that go away. And figure out, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to make things better for you. And so that's why, you need, when we go to the applications, we're looking for people who've done all kinds of things, have been all over the place, because you never know when one of those things is actually going to be the link to figure out, how to go and develop this relationship with that person that you're treating.
Those are excellent points. Yeah. That's great. Hey, we'll come back to some of those things about when you're looking at applications at Duke. But before we do that, let's dive into some of those curricular highlights. Okay. From what I read, you've taught in the curriculum there a bit. And so when you're meeting prospective applicants, and I said earlier, Duke has a unique curriculum, the way that first year, second year, and third year, fourth year are structured. What are some of those highlights that you want people to take away when they are exploring Duke Med?
Right. So our goal with the school was to produce leaders in medicine. We want people to be able to change things for the better. And so there's a number of components that, come into play with that. And so, part of it's, one, you have to be able to think critically. The second is you have to be able to think creatively. The other thing is you have to, be able to lead and function as a member of a team. And the other is you have to, understand the role research or advanced thinking or, hypothesis-driven process is, because all these things promote and advance the practice of medicine. So the way that things are structured, you have our first year is an accelerated first year, because the first 2 years of a conventional school are all compressed into one. So it's a much faster pace, and you're asked to, learn probably and work a little bit harder than, the rest of the schools, within the United States that don't have, this sort of curriculum. The second year is actually your clinical year. And this is key because it integrates all of the material that you've learned from the basic science earlier on with your clinical things. And I think that there's a lot of value to that, because I remember part of my med school experience is it was really frustrating sitting in class learning about basic science stuff that you kind of learned as an undergrad, and you're just waiting to kind of finally get to see patients. Yeah. And I think, this way it kind of helps you to integrate things and appreciate things a little bit more. Like, for instance, stuff like, cardiac output, because heart rate times stroke volume. You learn about all that stuff. It's like, okay, well, that's fine. But when you actually see it in action, then it really kind of matters. Like, okay, preload, afterload, how am I going to adjust this? Or even simple things. Like I remember, being in lectures about, vitamins, and be like, you got to be kidding me. We're learning about vitamins in med school, but then if you have someone who comes in with, capillary fragility, easy bruising, bleeding, bone pain, fatigue, it's like, whoa, you're thinking, well, this might be an oncologic process here just because of all those sort of things, but it really ends up being like vitamin C deficiency. It's really scurvy. Yeah. But so now you have a better appreciation for, okay, so that's why I learned about those kind of like what I thought were obscure things of like vitamins, but now it really makes sense. And, all sorts of stuff like that, the way, calcium works with, the cardiac action potential and how that stabilizes someone with hyperkalia. All these things now make sense because you're seeing it a lot earlier than you would have. And so you have a better appreciation for the beauty of the basic science, when you're in the clinical realm. So I think that helps to tie things together. And people may say that, well, how much do you really retain out of that first year? But I think it's reinforced by getting out there a lot earlier in the clinical realm.
Yeah. What about what are those first few? How's the first year structured? Are they in a lot of lecture, or is it small group learning? What is it?
It's a combination of things. Yeah. So you have a lot of it's small group stuff. Well, at least with the COVID thing. Yeah. So and some of it will be the big lecture, and a lot. There's also small groups there with with patients as well that you'll do with, and then large groups with patients. So.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. A lot of it's in a team-based learning format, because we transitioned to that probably, I think, maybe 10 years ago or so, because we wanted to get the student actively involved in the learning process.
In the first year, do they do like some preclinical things to start to ramp themselves up to learn how to use the instruments and how to start doing patient exams and histories and things so that they're ready for second year?
Right.
So
So there's an actual class that goes through almost the entirety of the first year that kind of like will focus on specific exam things, and then so you should be ready by the time that you're ready to go into your second your clinical year.
And then once you get to the clinical year, are there classes that kind of you come back to reinforce some of those? So it's not just like your first year is in class and done, but you do come back. Okay.
Right. Yes.
Oh wow. Yep. And do students get to pick where they get to go? So I know from what I read, you're affiliated with, there's the Duke Medical Center and the Children's Hospital and VA, probably leaving some people out.
Yeah, so everything's like pretty much within a block of each other. So the VA is right across from Duke North, and then there's Duke North, Duke South, the Duke Med Pavilion, Duke Cancer Center, and the Children's Hospital is integrated into Duke North. So really almost everything is within like a small radius of each other. And the only time you might drive out would be if you were going to, Duke Regional, which is probably only less than 10 minutes away.
Oh.
And then sometimes there's the family med ones that you obviously would need to go to, different, smaller locales. But pretty much everything's in one spot.
Wow.
Which makes it very convenient because you don't have to drive all over Los Angeles or or San Francisco. Everything is really in one area, and it makes it you can be living across the street and walk 1 block to get to your rotation, so it's less than 10-minute door to door sort of thing. So it makes it really convenient for a lot of our students.
Are there any special programs that first years and second years can get involved in, or special tracks that you would want people to be aware of?
Well, yeah, there's the primary care leadership track is one that actually has its own selection process, and that their focus is on a lot of the community work, a lot of leadership within the primary care realm. And so their curriculum's a little bit different than the traditional MD curriculum. And of course, there's the MSTP, program as well. And so those are the primary ones. And there's also a longitudinal program that's a little bit different as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put links to the curricular structure in the show notes and to a link. I read a little bit about the primary care leadership track, so I'll put links to that too if people want to go and read a little bit more about it. So when you get to first year, it's the basic sciences and starting to ramp students up to get ready for that second clinical year for clinical rotations. What happens in the third year and the fourth year? What do students get to?
So the third year is actually your research or advanced degree year. And there's a lot of importance to this because, this ends up being the creative element, the research and advanced, thinking element. And so, if you think about it, for our students, when have they ever had a chance to choose the direction that they wanted? Probably never, because
everything's prescribed, or you're always doing something for the next step.
Right. Yeah. So like in high school, you're doing stuff to get in your respective undergraduate institutions. In undergrad, you're doing whatever the med schools are saying to do. And then even in your first 2 years here, you're doing whatever you're told to. But you're asked, in sometime in your second year, it's like, what do you want to do for
next year?
Yeah. And so you get to pick.
Yeah.
And so it's a chance to choose, a chance to pursue your passion, chance to, go in the direction you want to go in. And I tell our students a lot of times you may never, ever be asked that again until you have your own lab, decades later. So this is a real opportunity to make a difference and to pursue what you want to do. And so that's one of the things. So it's a chance to choose. The other thing is it's a chance to reflect on things too, because in a traditional curriculum, you've gone through your first 2 years, and then you've gone through your third year, and then suddenly you as a third year, you're kind of you have to pick what you want to do for the rest of your life, soon when your
Yeah.
fourth year starts. But here in your third, you have a whole year to kind of like reflect upon that decision. You can really make an educated, deductive, thought process here in terms of like figuring out what's going on. And so, that's, so you really know what you want to do. And so that's, part of the, being able to reflect. And then it's also a chance to prepare too. So part of like, getting this, you get a first authored, paper, or you're getting your master's in something. So it's helping you to prepare for that fourth year. And then I think lastly, it's a chance to grow and kind of, recharge your batteries as well, because a lot of times people get a chance to travel and be in like in Africa or Asia or South America doing work, and it's so it's a chance to really do everything that you wanted to do, and so you're ready when you are going into your fourth year. So it's almost like
summarize, so students can choose to do a research project,
or they can get like masters in public health or MBA or JD,
or they can do some advanced clinical electives to explore like a path. So let's say they did pediatrics in their second year clinical rotations, but they're thinking about pediatric cardiology, or can they then do some advanced kind of exploring, or how does that work?
So part of the third year is you actually can do like sub-Is or other rotations during that time frame. Okay. And I guess the other thing is like you have protected time to study for the boards doing this.
Everybody wants to know protected time for boards. So there's some board study time in there.
So it's usually like people usually will take like 4 to 6 weeks. I think if you take 8 weeks, that's
you get saturated. We see students like they're overset. There's like, I said 8 weeks, but now I just want to take the darn thing.
So like usually 4 to 6 ends up being, I think. I'd
be interested to see once we get some classes that get into that pass fail part that for step one turns to be pass fail. If students will take maybe 4 weeks, they don't feel they need maybe 6 weeks. I'd be interested to see any movement there. We talked about global opportunities. That's a common question you get from prospective students is where does Duke have global opportunities? If so, where can I go? When can I go? And what's your response?
So a lot of times I think they found it via people who have been to these places previously. But, we have people going, I think that a lot of times to Tanzania, Kenya. Some people have actually gone to, I think, Vietnam and Brazil as well. And I think, as far as it stands now, we have 2 scholarship spots in Singapore. I'm presuming, I don't know what's going to happen, with that because of travel restrictions. But, we had, that had been something that was fairly consistent in the past. And I think the people who've gone there had either done like, infectious diseases or like, I think, medical mechanical devices.
Cool. What about, so what happens in the fourth year? I mean, so they have time to maybe do some away rotations, and if they want to explore some programs outside of Duke.
So in the non-COVID environment, you were able to do rotations away, and and eventually you would have to do capstone at the end. But you had time to do at least a couple rotations. This year, I mean, no one can do away rotations, so everything's in house.
Is research required for every student?
To graduate, no. So but you will have to do something productive with that third year. I mean, so it would be like you'd have to get an MPH or do something like that. But
all right, so there has to be some. It can't just be a year like just a reflection year. I'm just going to sit back for a year. That's
always been a point of contention that I think the students need to realize that they have to be wise with that year and do something that's improves their chances of matching for residency and really work hard and make things happen in the right way.
There has to be some product to that. You're just not sitting under a tree and thinking about what you want to be when you grow up. That's great. What about so you mentioned a little bit ago about there's the students formed a band and stuff. So what I'm hearing is that students have time to have fun at Duke.
Yes.
What do you see students getting involved in at Duke? That I'm sure you have a list of student organizations, as long as, my arm. What kind of things do you see a lot of students getting involved in or doing in the community?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of students have been involved with the Duke Elementary.
Oh,
so what with that, they would bring in elementary students, and then they would teach them about health, and they would do the digestive system, the cardiac system, and a few others, and so it would kind of forms as both health education and science, and a lot of students also have been involved with Boost, which is one of our pipeline programs through the through I think junior high school and high school, and it helps kids with the STEM classes and gets them to kind of like understand it and appreciate that they too can have a role within sciences as well, when sometimes access isn't as as good as it should be.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's inspirational and helping these students kind of think about STEM careers and STEM programs. Oh, that's great. What do you hear from students that it's something they really like about Duke Med? Maybe you kind of hear in passing, and the students you've got to know. What is something that you hear the students? It's kind of a common theme.
I think they like their colleagues.
Yeah.
They really like their classmates, and I think that helps to form a cohesive group that will work together. But yeah, they really like the people within their class.
What have you're not from Durham. You moved there relatively recently. What's something that compared to when you were in Southern California or Hawaii that you've come to appreciate about the area of Durham or the culture of Duke?
Yeah, so Durham's actually grown considerably because we've been here, I think, 13 years now, and before there was hardly anything here. And then in terms of like where you wanted to eat, and it was very limited. But during that time, it's grown considerably. Like for instance, my kids would always want to get ice cream at this place called the Parlor, and in the summer, the line would be like out the door to the corner kind of thing. And I go, and this is like, 10:30 at night when they close at 11, I'm going to the kids. It's like, you guys sure you want to wait in line that long? But yeah, and there's a lot of fantastic restaurants here. The community's really grown. And I think it's, part of it's, I think they're focusing on the graduate, postgraduate community as well. That's, I think really helped in terms of, just places to eat and places to do things. And Durham's I guess in terms of environments, we found it to be a fantastic place. I mean, it's very progressive. It's very diverse. It's kind of like being in Los Angeles or parts of Northern Cal. And then the weather's like fairly. It kind of gets a little bit warm in the summer, and it might snow intermittently. During the winter, but in the fall and the spring, it's actually pretty good.
Really nice. Yeah, it's really nice there. That's cool. Any other highlights that you are thinking about that you wanted to make sure we got across to listeners about Duke? I mean, we covered, really some of those main highlights of the first 2 years, and that the unique piece of either really that third year, that exploratory kind of year. Anything else? We talked about global opportunities, research. Is there anything we left untouched about the curriculum that you wanted, as you're thinking about, you want to make sure we mention?
See, I mean, we're always, the curriculum's always in a state of change. I mean, it's never static. It's always dynamic because, medicine's always changing. So a curriculum has to follow that. And, what was taught, 5 years ago may not be the right way to teach today. So, so we're always trying to make this place better. And with that, there are, good things and bad things would happen. But at least we're striving to make things, occur in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Keeping your eye on what are some of those changes in medical education that are kind of moving things forward, staying ahead of the curve kind of thing. Yeah. I totally get that.
And then, with our students, I mean, they have to understand, like, back in the day, there was only X amount of knowledge you really needed to know. And it's far, different now. Like I use the Y equals E to the X, thing, because that kind of like it kind of typifies the way medical knowledge is now. It's a logarithmic curve. I mean, in terms of what you have and all the diseases that are keep coming out, all the different treatments, and then the human brain stays fairly static at Y equals mx plus b, right? I mean, it's only, you're smart, but you can only you kind of cap out at some point.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, but then I told him, well, how are you going to attack that area under the Y equals the logarithmic curve? And so you have to stack all the Y equals mx plus b's, and so that's kind of like the foundation of teamwork, because you have to work together in this environment in order to solve problems, because you can't do it alone. There's no way in the world that that's going to happen. So the more Y equals mx plus b's you stack, the better chances you have of solving the problem. And so that's why you need to work together. And that's, so hopefully that, resonates with them.
It's a great way to put it. Really a great analogy. I hope, well, that's awesome. I hope that's a good takeaway. Okay. So let's switch to you've kind of, I think, always going to whet the appetite of listeners. Like, okay, this curriculum sounds really exciting. And there's a lot of interactiveness and an ability to explore. Okay. What are you looking for? In the admissions part, what are you looking for in applicants? What are some of those characteristics or attributes that you feel make for a successful student at Duke that you're then looking for in the application process?
Okay. I mean, first of all, you have to care about people. So it's compassion, kindness, a sense of humanism, good value system. You have to really you have to be motivated and dedicated to doing better for the people that you take care of. I mean, that's probably the most thing, because if you don't have that, then why are you in medicine to begin with?
Right.
So yeah. And I've seen people like that, from med school, from residency. It's if you don't like trying to care for people or dealing with people, you're going to be very miserable, and you're going to make everybody else miserable around you because you're very miserable. So you have to care for people. That's probably the most important thing out of anything else. And then, you have to be dedicated, committed. You have to be willing to work hard and push yourself to the limits. You have to be competent. Those are probably the main things that we kind of look for.
So given those things you just mentioned, what would be maybe some examples off the top of your head that illustrates to a listener, like, okay, how do I demonstrate like I'm willing to go, work really hard? Or how do I demonstrate that I really care about people? Or that what would be some examples that maybe you look for in applications? Sorry.
Yeah. So I think part of it's like, taking yourself out of the box, so to speak. So putting yourself in an environment where you have to tolerate ambiguity and not be able to, and challenge yourself. So for instance, I like to tell people about hospice. Because hospice is very different. It's not like being in, the emergency department. Okay, we can do this and fix that. It's like, there's nothing that can fix anything right now. I mean, it's pretty much, this is the end. And so there's no medicine, there's no surgery, there's no, intervention, procedure that's going to change what's going to happen in the end. So how do you deal with this? How do you, so it's a different element. So it's all the human element that kind of comes into play, and, just talking with someone, listening to them. And so that's, I think, very different than being a paramedic or
in the OR observing open heart surgery. We can fix this. We're doing,
And plus, I think hospice ends up being more active in terms of what you do. Because, if you're just observing, you're just observing, right? It's just you're with a bunch of people and just doing stuff. But with hospice, it's like a lot of times it's, I think, one-on-one. And it's just you and that person, and you've got to make it happen. And at least with EMS, sometimes there's like 2 or 3 of you to try and make things happen. Hospice is and so it challenges you to do something different, and but I think it makes them a better person.
I completely agree.
And I think they have a better appreciation for what really needs to happen in medicine and why. And so that's something we kind of like look at. If you've done hospice, it's like, I think you kind of have a better perspective.
Yeah, it's a little off the beaten path, like as far as, I think pre-meds or somebody want to get in the hospital, which is important. They want to see. But what you mentioned, how I 100% agree. I remember, I'll never forget interviewing an applicant, and I said, tell me about your hospice experience. This is really interesting. He said, all right, because I remember I went to this one room and I thought, what does this person want to, they don't know me. I'm 22. Like, what can I offer this person? I went in there and I said, hey, you want to talk? You want to sit down? And he said, this lady just wanted me to hold her hand. She was really tired. She couldn't talk, but she just wanted me to hold her hand. And he's like, as I sat there, I kind of thought, wow, this is really powerful. And this is what she wants right now. I'll sit here and just hold her hand because her family's not here. They're not around. And he got it. Like that's right. That's what you're talking. That's just one example of what you're talking. He got it. Like that's caring for people. And you realized I can help, even though I just feel like I'm 22 and this person doesn't know me.
Right. So, exactly.
So I think there's, your application numbers last year were near 7,000 applications, and your class size is like 124, 125. So how do people rise to the level of they're getting an interview, or they're being selected to come and meet with you? Well, pre-COVID days, but how do they? What gets to that interview invitation? Yeah,
well, a lot of it has to do with the essays. I mean, I think we have a reputation for having the most. I guess comprehensive and challenging format for things, and from that we hope to kind of like gather a lot of information about what we had just talked about in terms of a sense of compassion, an understanding of why you're in medicine, why you're going to do this, how are you going to go about doing things, and so that's why those essays are there. I mean, we figure, part of it's self-selective. I mean, if you're really interested in Duke, you're going to fill those out. If you're not that interested, then, you'll move on and go no further. Yeah. And so, part of it's the essays. And then after that, it's a lot of it's, the clinical experiences, because you have to demonstrate that you can work with patients and people, and that you like doing that. Because if you haven't proved it to yourself, how are you going to prove it to us? And in the time that, if you're in med school, that's not the time to prove it. You should have gotten that down before you were even accepted. So I'm hearing that you really value those clinical experiences. Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you have to work with patients and understand, and then goes back, what we talked about earlier, with the connections and relationships, and then what we had just talked about with hospice, and really just a sense of humanism and kindness and compassion. Yeah. Since Duke is a very research-focused institution, what's the value on research? What I think applicants frequently want to know, like, do I have to have research to be competitive at your school? Considering Duke's a very known for research there. Yeah, not necessarily, but you do have to understand the hypothesis-driven thought process. I mean, whether you've done work in the humanities, music, art, literature, or the sciences, you still have to understand how you propose something, verify it or not verify it, and, reach a conclusion and move on from there. That I think that's probably the key point there. So, I mean, you don't necessarily need to be like a first author person or something like that, but you have to understand how things are done and why things are done. I mean, because that sort of thinking is going to, hopefully help move medicine forward. I mean, that's the goal, is to improve patient care. And if you move medicine forward by, matching, what you learned from a research type of thought process to clinical, then you are able to do things. I mean, so that's probably the most important part about the research element of the application. So not required, but being able to demonstrate an understanding of the research principles and the like. Okay. Right. I just wanted to kind of recap, because that's always such a common question from people, is when is research required? Is research required? But if the way you described it, having an understanding of the research principles is what the foundations you're looking for. Right. Exactly. How
How about gap years? That's become a more common thing recently. What is your opinion on students taking gap years? Are you a fan, or you're just indifferent?
Well, it's funny because back in my day, if you took a gap year, people thought you were crazy.
Like, what's going on with that guy?
Yeah. But, it's funny. During med school, I had always been very envious of the people who had done that, because they had gotten a chance to do things that I knew I would never, ever have the chance to do, which is true to this day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think now most people are taking gap years. And I think it ends up being a lot more effective and helps them make them a better applicant. Because, one, just from a logistical standpoint, is you're not dealing with all the things that you have to do as a senior to graduate.
True.
While applying to med school at the same time. I mean, you finish your undergraduate career, and then you can focus on, what's going on with, your application in the following year. And then secondly, you get a chance to do all these like incredible things, like, Teach for America, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, work in some fantastic research labs. And you can really focus on that and really get everything you wanted out of that. And so that, I think, is also very helpful. And plus, I think it helps you get settled and, prepared. And it's, again, going back to preparation and reflection, it gives you a chance to say, okay, I'm ready to apply now. And I kind of got all these other things out of my system. Because I know when I was a student, it was like, I always wish I wanted to do all these other things that I heard about all these, I met all these people who've done it. It's like, gosh, why am I?
Once you get on the train, it doesn't stop.
Yeah. Because you go from med school to residency, to fellowship, to working. And then it's over.
Then you get some vacations interspersed from time to time, but that's it.
You'll never be able to take a year off. Although one of my friends from residency did that because he was going into ophthalmology, but he was this totally awesome, pianist, and he wanted to take a year off to study at this place in Paris, and his ophthalmology residency said no, because you're slotted into that slot. So after I think this is what happened. After he finished ophthalmology residency, he took a year off to actually go to piano, and then eventually he started working after that. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
But I think that's extremely rare. I think that's what happened. I don't know 100% for sure because I've kind of lost touch with him after all these years. But I
remember reading an applicant one time he was at Notre Dame, and he had killer scores and killer grades. And I said, his name was Jim. And I said, Jim, looking at your application, it's really strong and you've got great grades. You could have applied last year as a senior. Why didn't you do that? And he said, he's like, I realized, my senior year, I really wanted to enjoy my last year of college at Notre Dame. And I knew I had a lot going on. I had a senior thesis I had to do. And I just saw when I was a junior, I saw some seniors applying to med school, and they just seemed completely stressed out and not enjoying everything else because they were constantly worried about our interviews coming, or how can I schedule things and reschedule stuff for interview. He said, it just seemed like, not for me. So he took a year, and that's great advice. I always share that story with senior or students that may be considering, should I do a gap year? I'm like, well, think about what that year will look like you mentioned. Like, there's a lot going on, and you can take some time to kind of pull away, and you'll never get that. You could potentially not get that opportunity again.
Right. Yeah, but I think the key would have to be like they would have to do something productive. I mean, that's the question we always ask in the interview. It's like, well, you're taking your gap year. What are you doing now? I mean, if they're like not doing anything, it's like, okay,
just in the basement playing 2K21.
Yeah.
Not productive. No.
I would agree with that.
What about, so this year's a little bit different, I would say, is an understatement. And one thing I noticed on your website was that this year you are considering applicants without an MCAT score for being invited for interview. You'll need the MCAT at some point for
correct
acceptance decision, but you're not requiring the MCAT at the time they're being evaluated for an interview. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes. So we understand that there's a number of things that have affected an applicant's ability to take that test. So we've pushed the application dates back. I mean, I think right now we're our deadline's now in December, when it had been in the middle of November, and then we're also looking at applications without the MCAT score. However, you will still need an MCAT score to matriculate. And by virtue of that, you need an MCAT score to go to the exec committee before your application's reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, that's a very small number of applications. I think when we got the printout from AAMC, I think there was like 26 people who were probably not going to take the MCAT out of, I don't know, I think the number they gave us was like, close to 8,000. Mm-hmm. So I think that ends up being like a very low number.
I mean, I looked at our poll the other day, and we're around a little over 7,000 verified applications right now. And there was a small number that did not have it. And I know, but I just got an email today from a young woman who said she's from Tennessee, but she has to go retaking it in Louisville. And so there are challenges. And
right.
I appreciate that's a nice accommodation. Has it been hard for you? Have you seen an application yet without an MCAT? Has that been a little bit hard of a transition to kind of try to evaluate without that? For an interview,
I've only seen one or two, and that didn't really change what our impression was.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about, so let's go into the interview day. So you make it through, you fill out all the Duke essays, the exec committee likes what they've read and they want to bring a student invite them for an interview. Duke does MMI. Tell us about the interview day. We can either go pre-COVID interview day or current interview day experience.
We're trying to keep it fairly similar, although I think volume-wise we have to decrease the amount. So in the pre-COVID days, we had brought in almost 25, 26 people per day and interviewed twice a week. During the COVID time, because it's kind of laborious to move people from rooms back and forth, we're only going to do like 10 people a day, 4 times a week.
Okay.
So, so what we had done, before is like, in the pre-COVID days, we would have a gathering at either a coffee shop or an ice cream parlor the evening before with our students. And it would be pretty much free form. The students it was just students only either.
Okay.
And I would just show up to, cover the tab, but and make sure and enforce the curfew, I guess.
All right. Get out. Yeah. You got an early day tomorrow.
Yeah. But so that was a chance to kind of for the applicants to just talk to our students about school, and also get a chance the applicants to meet their fellow applicants. And we found that, a lot of times that would help with the team stations that we had with the, because a lot of times you may have sat next to that person on the evening before, and then now they're your partner at the team station. So they're no longer a total stranger to you. So that was part of the benefit. And plus it got, the applicants out of the hotel room and a chance to see Durham. And so that we thought that was, helpful. And then on the interview day, it'd start with breakfast. Either myself or one of the other, either Chair or Andrew would, give an intro. Then we would have, one of our leadership groups come and talk to people. And then you would either have either the tour or you would do the interview. Okay. And then the roles would flip after lunch. Got it. And then we'd have a short closing thing. And then after that, you would go home. Yeah. With the COVID thing now, it's just going to be, we have a whole bunch of different representative groups, because the students can't, meet with them. So each student group is now going to record something, and then so the applicants can actually go to that and then see the whole. And then if they have questions, they can actually ask the individual students, later on, and then follow up on that. And then again, just short. We're only interviewing in the afternoons now, and it's going to just be 10 people. Yeah. Boy, it's really building this from scratch has been a bit of a challenge this year for everybody. That is for sure. Yeah. What are your, so when it comes to MMI, what are some of your tips that you give applicants when they approach you and say, hey, Dr. Yee, I'm MMI interviews. How should I prepare? What's your advice for me to be successful in that type of interview environment? Right. Yeah. So a lot of it's just the basic stuff. I mean, always be yourself, be courteous to people, be professional, be polite, thank people for their time. That's probably the key things there. I mean, and don't, fabricate an answer or make something up that you shouldn't be making up, because, you'll probably end up being caught on that if you're, just be, honest, and, and if you don't know things, just say you don't know it. And, there are always going to be prompts or other leads that if you don't know that thing, that, you could, lead you in a direction where you can answer, portions of the question.
Are there ways to practice for MMI?
I guess it's always good to talk to your colleagues, your fellow applicants, or your friends at school, to kind of maybe just do a brief kind of, single question, and I know there's a lot of, prep things that are out there that people use, and I guess, that's okay. But, a lot of times, we still want to just see who you are rather than, a prepped version of who you are.
So the goal of MMI, for people that may be new listeners or not as familiar with MMI, it's the multi-mini interviews. And how many stations do you have?
We have 10.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the goal of a multiple mini interview is to try and get as much from each component as possible, and it should be as unbiased as possible as well. And so the basic definition is you're not supposed to know anything about them. They're not supposed to know anything about you, and you're not supposed to ask any questions outside of the framework of the question. I think a lot of times people don't really observe that rule a lot. I mean,
that's a good tip.
Because it shouldn't be, like if you're interviewing someone, you shouldn't say, well, tell me all about yourself, and then let's talk about the question that we're supposed to talk. It's like, it's what, the question you're assigned, that's what it needs, that's what needs to happen. And everything else is off limits. We have, I think, roughly 5 scenarios that are just a basic question, ethical or moral, sort of, scenario. And then we have a team station, which involves 2 rotations, one in which you're giving instructions and one in which you're receiving instructions. And so with that, it's a lot of teamwork, being, polite and courteous to your colleagues. Sometimes students are not as polite and courteous to their colleagues as possible, which, doesn't bode well for them.
Yeah. In a team, I did a simulation. We had a meeting at Duke, and they took us through some of the MMI simulation in your center there. And the team building one was interesting. And is it about getting the right product in the team building?
Not necessarily. I think it's just working together well. Yeah. I mean that's the goal. I mean, if you accomplish the task, that's fine. But it's more, even if you encounter a roadblock with your colleague, it's like, how do you, work with that person to kind of like get back to a point where you can actually move forward. And so that's what we're really looking at there.
Is it okay to laugh or smile or just kind of say, oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure this out, just to be, your regular self in a team building thing?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, there may be other people that disagree with me, but I would think that would be fine. It's like, okay, hey, guess what? We messed up big time. Let's kind of like go back 2 steps and see if we can retract to where we need to go.
I'm glad to hear that, because I just feel like sometimes applicants want to feel like maybe they have to be, okay, we got to get this right the first time, but it's okay to say, oh my God, put your hands up a little bit and go, okay, let me rethink this and let's get back on track. And I'll do my best to try to walk us through what we need to do with regards to this.
And it shows that you can refocus, look at different alternatives, on the fly. And so I think that way. And then, so then we have the team station, and then the last 2 we have the traditional interview stations.
Okay, great.
And part of that was because, when we were in the traditional format of the MMI, we weren't getting a lot of information that we needed to get, because you can only ask that question. And so that's why we kind of added kind of like these many traditional interview stations in which we can actually focus on, specific aspects of the application that we have, some questions about. And, a lot of it, would be like, well, this is your gap year. What are you doing this year? I mean, that's, something we can't ask in a traditional, scenario, but we can ask that in the multiple minute. And plus a lot of that was, feedback from our applicants as well. It's like, they didn't get a chance to tell us everything that they wanted to tell us about. So this offers them the opportunity to actually to do that. And so it's worked out, well for both parties.
Yeah, that's great that you're willing to kind of change tack a little bit and add those on based on feedback. And that's important. I've heard that too. Students say, I like to be able to tell my story a little bit outside of the prescribed scenario that we were in each station or each room. I guess we kind of hit on all the interview day aspects of MMI. What happens after that? Then they go to admissions committee and there's discussion. And if somebody's not accepted at the next time you guys put out your offers, what happens to those that are on the wait list? Like, how do you want to hear from them? Do you want to hear their love for Duke Med? What are your tips for those that are maybe not accepted right off the bat?
Yeah, I think it's always good to know that they're interested. As to where they stand on the wait list, I mean, that's kind of like, classified information. But it's always good to know, who still wants to be here, or who they feel that this is the best place for them. And so it's always good to know. It's not an absolute that they need to tell us, but I think it doesn't hurt. Yeah. We've kind of touched on a little bit of everything, from curriculum to what you're looking for in applicants and what make for successful students at Duke, and now at the interview day. And then what happens afterwards? Is there anything we didn't hit on that you wanted to make sure we got across to people? Well, yeah. So I always ask the students, it's kind of like a trick question, but I always ask them, what senses do you need to develop the most during medical school? Oh, what senses do you need to develop the most during medical school? And it's kind of like a trick question, because you a lot of times they'll say, okay, what's the vision? Is it hearing? It's touch, taste. I mean, with taste, you can't really do because that's a hospital violation, right? Those sort of things. But it really comes down to if you even just go back to the way that our curriculum's structured. One of them is common sense. And I actually got that from one of our former graduates, who's now I think an ophthalmology residence here, James Tian. And one of it's common sense. If you look at it, that's what you're learning in your first year of med school. It's common sense. I mean, for instance, cardiac output equals heart rate times stroke volume. That's a formula, and everything you do to improve your cardiac output is based on adjusting heart rate and stroke volume. And, on all the other, sort of equations, as well. So in anatomy, certain things are connected to certain things, and there are only X amount of variations that, people have ever seen. And so that's common sense in your first year. And then the other sense is a sixth sense. Okay. And that's what you're learning in your second year, your clinical year. It's like when you walk into a room, you see something's not exactly right here, and I need to do something very quickly. I mean, that's what should develop out of all that common sense that you learn in your first year. It's like something's not right here, and I've got to, do something right now to fix this. Even though maybe the monitor is showing something different than what you're seeing. It's something's and so it's all about, in the clinical realm, it's developing the sixth sense. You always want to be a step ahead in terms of your management of the patient rather than a step behind. Because if you're always behind, that's not going to lead to very good outcomes. And so you always want to be able to anticipate what's going to happen if you do this. If you don't do that, do I need to stick a needle in this to decompress, this, pneumothorax or what? But so a lot of it's the sixth sense, and then the last sense there is a sense of humor. Because you have to be able to step back a lot of times from, sometimes medicine's not every day is a good day, and you have to be able to step back from that and actually, recharge your batteries. And so that's kind of like, something I think that students had always, talked about, and I think it makes good sense. If you think about it. I mean, when you asked about the senses, my mind was like, oh, what about a sixth sense? And because I remember working with some physicians and nurses who they just, the way they kind of looked at a pit like, this is not good. Don't know why,
But
Right.
I would just observe like, dang, they're good. I don't know what, like they would spend a little more attention and just kind of like something's so not sitting well with me. I don't know what it is yet, but it just was very evident. And then they'd figure it out. There would be something underlying. They go, oh, this is bad right now.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping to get from our Duke students. It's like you just don't think like everybody else. You think you're willing to look at other things in order to make, and ideally, if you're a resident, you should be, everyone should be going, hey, go talk to the person from Duke. He or she's the one's going to be able to figure this out because they know these things. Yeah. And so it's making sense of, it goes back to, Occam's razor. There has to be one explanation for everything that, you have this like disparate, collection of things, but there has to be one explanation for why things are the way they are. Yeah. And so, that's part of our goal about, having people here. It's like, be that person that's going to make the difference. Be that person that's going to make the diagnosis, be that person that's going to, improve healthcare and the well-being of, all the people that you take care of.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to kind of wrap things up. Before we kind of end our conversation, I think those are good final thoughts. Any recommendations? Like, are there any like books that you would recommend to listeners, whether that's related to medicine or not, or podcasts or websites or something that you enjoy or like to share with people?
Yeah, well, I've read The Butchering Art. I think it had to do with Joseph Lister in the time of Victorian England, and how they actually, and a lot of this has to do with the science of how they actually changed the way medicine was done from, I guess, the non-sterile time to actually doing stuff that was more cleaner and less patient damaging than they had in the past. So that was one of them. And another one, because my kids always liked stuff about cats, the Traveling Cat Chronicles. It's written by a Japanese author, but I think it's, if I remember everything about it correctly, it has to do with someone who's dying of terminal illness, and he goes traveling around to visit all these different people with his cat, and eventually, he ends up, passing away. But then, the cat is kind of like the interplayed through all of these, things when she goes to visits, all these different people, and so that's I thought that was a pretty good. And then I think even as a movie, that was actually pretty good.
Oh, there's a movie. Okay, I'm going to put links to these.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Oh yeah, my kids always like to watch those anime type movies. So Weathering for You and Your Name.
Weathering for You.
Yeah, and then I think before that was Your Name, and then I think Weathering for You probably came out like a year or so ago, and then I think Your Name probably came out a couple years before that.
And you got into that too.
Yeah, because my daughter's like into
she's art.
Yeah, and so she always does anime and mangas so that's how I kind of got into
cool.
watching. I always watch the same things that they do.
It makes life easier at home.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic, Dr. Yee. I really appreciate the time, and really you really made this very enjoyable and exciting about Duke, and your insight and your experience is so powerful. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the invite and having a chance to talk with you about all these things.
Yeah, this has been great. Well, listen, I know you're busy. I'm going to wrap things up here and let you go, but thanks for doing this. Again, this has been great.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. Thank you.
We'll see you around.
All right. Thanks.